This video is brought to you by Paragon, my own original sci-fi novel, now available on Amazon. Check the description for links where you can buy. I'm back from a wee holiday and ready to talk about more sci-fi goodness, but rather than taking a deep dive into any specific one, I thought I'd outline my personal favourites. These are my top 5 favourite sci-fi universes. Number 5, Blade Runner. Something which I haven't really expressed on this channel is that I love cyberpunk. I love Ghost in the Shell, I really enjoyed Altered Carbon, and I'm super hyped for CD Projekt Red's new game. And Blade Runner is the quintessential cyberpunk world, and the 2 Blade Runner movies we have are 2 of the best science fiction films ever made. Not only is every frame of these movies a work of art, but the thematic discussions to be had in response to the stories these films tell is never ending. Blade Runner is a dying world, an Earth on the verge of total collapse, with the last vestiges of life eking out a living in expansive wastelands and overpopulated cities. Not only is the replicant aspect of society a springboard for all kinds of fascinating social commentary, but there are a ton of badass weapons, gadgets and vehicles to satiate the nerdy mind. Even so, we've only been given a small glimpse of Blade Runner's larger fictional universe. Earth has stagnated and is well on its way to dying, but what about Off-World? What about those colonies, these planetary wars we've heard about? Blade Runner and Blade Runner 2049 have already taken us deep into the bowels of a crumbling Earth, but there's still so much more to explore, so many things still to be seen which you wouldn't believe. Number 4, The Expanse. The Expanse is currently the best sci-fi TV show on right now, and if you haven't watched it already, get onto Amazon Prime and marathon that shit in time for season 4. What makes The Expanse so unique among other sci-fi universes is its commitment to realism. Whereas other universes bypass the real-life obstacles of space travel, The Expanse revels in them for something more interesting. The result is a universe full of unique ship designs, stunning visuals, and a solar system-based story which feels just as epic and diverse as any other galactic saga. Eschewing the monoculture trope which so often plagues their IPs, the United Nations, Mars Congressional Republic and OPA are all distinct in their individuality but also captivating in their nuance. And it's thanks to the brilliant writing of the TV show and no doubt the books that we get a broad look at these worlds while being thrilled by the excellent story. Number 3, Babylon 5. Babylon 5 is easily in my top 5 favourite sci-fi TV shows of all time, and when I first made a video on it, one of the highlights I mentioned was its world building. J. Michael Straczynski's landmark sci-fi saga gives us a 5-year glimpse of a universe with a history stretching long before the first episode and long after the last. The emphasis on history and differing levels of advancement creates a setting where different races and factions can interact in constantly interesting ways. The aristocracy of the Centauri, the aspirational Earth, the spiritual Minbari, and the unknowable Vorlons. Each faction is at such a different stage of development, yet at the same time they are often mirrors of each other. Babylon 5 not only leaves the viewer wanting to know more about its history, but also leaves the viewer speculating about the future. What will become of humanity in 1,000 years? How did the Vorlons begin? Will the cycle of violence between the Centauri and the Narn ever be broken? The TV show gives us a breathtaking 5-year epic, and yet we still want more. Number 2, Mass Effect. Mass Effect feels like a universe which is pulled from every other universe I've already mentioned, and yet it has created something with its own identity. The Mass Effect universe has managed to brilliantly capture the epic history and space opera of Babylon 5, the adherence to a more grounded internal logic of The Expanse, and the morally grey, thematically intriguing underground of Blade Runner. Being a video game rather than a movie or TV show, the Mass Effect trilogy had more time and more opportunities to render its fictional world in detail. We are taken from the gleaming height of government on the Citadel to the down and dirty criminality of Omega, and of course we are visited by the ancient immensity of the Reapers. An entire movie or TV show could take place on a single world, merely visited by Commander Shepard and their crew. Although the disappointing spin-off failed to live up to the same standard, I'm glad this trilogy set such a high bar in the first place. Before number 1, a few honourable mentions. Star Wars may seem conspicuously absent from this list, but I have a few criteria in what I give a proper spot to. While the Star Wars universe showcases a hell of a lot of imagination and creativity, the stories which have been told have been a bit samey for me personally. And yes, I'm sure there's some expanded universe thing, did something different, but the movie trilogies are the primary Star Wars product, and it's what most people are familiar with. It's the Jedi versus the Sith. the Rebels versus the Empire, the Resistance versus the First Order. In short, a simple good versus evil. For me, Star Wars has always been special because of its characters and the interesting arcs they've been given, but the universe itself always plays second fiddle, and as a result, I've never really been that interested in exploring more of it. At least that's the reason I can think of that I'm not really proper into it. Dune, on the other hand, is a brilliant universe which simply hasn't been depicted in a truly great piece of media yet. The David Lynch movie was butchered in the edit, and the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries simply didn't have the resources to do justice to Frank Herbert's ideas. But the universe itself is awesome. A galactic feudal society 10,000 years in the future, a civilization built on folding space, super speed / teleportation martial arts, giant sandworms. There are amazing ideas woven throughout the Dune universe. I can only hope the forthcoming adaptation by Denis Villeneuve finally gives this setting justice on the big screen. Warhammer 40k is like heavy metal cover art come to life. The lore of 40k is just ridiculous in every way, and that's why it's so cool. A standard space marine would be the superhero in any other story. The method of FTL is worth a trilogy of books by itself. Each faction, each character, and each unit is so dense, and that absurdity, while cool, is also why it's only an honourable mention here. There has yet to be a truly relatable story told in the 40k universe. The stakes, the backstory are so over the top it's pretty hard to empathise with. And this makes sense. I mean, the lore is created for a tabletop game rather than a TV show or movie, and while I love thinking about the insane concepts featured in 40k, it prevents that vital emotional connection. And finally, number one, you've all guessed it by now, it's Star Trek. Star Trek is so ubiquitous as a sci-fi property, it's actually worth noting how strange it is overall. Star Trek was caught in the middle of the pulpy adventure stories of Hugo Gernsback and the more thought-provoking literature of Asimov or Bradbury. Because of that, Star Trek is surprisingly able to shift comfortably between the pulpy adventure fun of a starship captain wrestling with a giant lizard and the provocative ideas of an android court case. But what I personally love about Star Trek is its sense of freedom. Because Star Trek was originally built on an exploration premise, the original series alone was able to introduce more sci-fi worlds, ships, races, and concepts than anything else on this list. You want to have an epic war between two galactic factions? Star Trek has that. A time travel adventure? It's got you covered. Detective stories, spy stories, love stories, horror, thriller, action, adventure. Star Trek has literally done it all. In terms of writing, Star Trek also has so much freedom in terms of new ideas. New major factions can be introduced at the drop of a hat, and it works. The Borg, for example, show up over 100 episodes and 6 movies into the franchise. While I think shows like The Expanse and Babylon 5 are stronger than any one Star Trek show overall, and movies like Blade Runner can explore themes in even more depth, there is a limit to what can be done with those properties. Star Trek can jump back to modern day or thousands of years into the future. We can see the Federation at its height, or we can see it in ruins. The Klingons can be bitter enemies or trusted allies. We could follow the Enterprise or any other ship, or go outside the Federation entirely. The Star Trek universe is virtually unmatched in its potential for creative freedom, and because of that, it will always be my favourite sci-fi universe. If you like my videos, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date on all my new uploads. You can see videos up to a week early on my Patreon for as little as $5 a month. Speaking of which, I'd like to quickly thank my patrons David Phelps, Chris Lord, Andy Luke, Larry Bennett, James Vanderhaeg, T. Stoney, L. Carton, and Millie Coleman. Until next time, have a good one, and as always, live long and prosper.